Glad to be back with you again. Welcome to Etual. I'm Ayola Kasim. The Paris Agreement comes with praise and condemnation in equal measures, depending on which side of the divide one stands to look at it. Of course, the stage is now set for the analysis on what some have called the post-mortem of the outcome. But today, we will bring to you some of what happened before the deal was done. Do stay with us.
C'est un petit marteau, mais je pense qu'il peut faire de grandes choses.
The Paris Agreement for the first time brings all nations into a common cause based on their historic, current and future responsibilities. The Universal Agreement's main aim is to keep a global temperature rise this century well below 2 degrees Celsius and to drive efforts to limit the temperature increase even further to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The 1.5 degrees Celsius limit is a significantly safer defense line against the worst impacts of a changing climate. Additionally, the agreement aims to strengthening the ability to deal with the impact of climate change. The Global Climate Summit agreed on a deal setting the course for a historic transformation of the world's fossil fuel-driven economy within decades in a bid to arrest global warming.
When historians look back on this day, very historic day, they will say that global cooperation to secure a future safe from climate change took a dramatic U-turn here in Paris. Today, we can look into the eyes of our children, our grandchildren, and we can finally tell them that we have joined hands to bequeath a more habitable world to them and to future generations.
After 4 years of fraught United Nations talks, often pitting the interests of rich nations against the poor, imperiled island states against rising economic powerhouses, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius declared the pact adopted to the standing applause and whistles of delegates from almost 200 nations.
L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
Hailed as the first truly global climate deal, committing both rich and poor nations to reining in rising emissions blamed for warming the planet, it sets out a sweeping long-term goal of eliminating net man-made greenhouse gas output this century. To reach these ambitious and important goals, appropriate financial flows will be put in place, thus making stronger action by developing countries and the most vulnerable possible in line with their own national objectives.
It is an agreement of conviction. It is an agreement of solidarity with the most vulnerable. It is an agreement of long-term vision, because it is an agreement of commitment to turn this new legal framework into the engine of safe growth for all, for the rest of this century.
Most climate activists reacted positively, encouraged by long-term targets that were more ambitious than they expected, while warning it was only the first step of many.
When I read it, what I thought is, I am witnessing a moment in history. This text, especially what they're calling the long-term goal, which is this idea that we're going to hit net zero emissions in the second half of the century. And what that means is that we have a path to 100% clean energy. That's what everyone was marching for before this climate conference. It's what 3.6 million people are calling for. It's a huge deal. It's what ends the fossil fuel era and shifts us off of the things that are poisoning our planet.
This is neither a moment for triumphalism or for despair. We cannot be triumphalistic of the deal that is done here when tens of thousands of lives have been lost already as a result of climate impacts, and where furthermore tens of thousands of lives are on the precipice of survival. Indigenous peoples, people in low-lying states and so on. Neither should it be a message of despair for us in the climate movement. We have won the core argument that climate crisis is serious, it requires urgent action, and we will continue to mobilize from tomorrow to make sure that the end of the fossil fuel era starts today and that we see the transition to 100% renewable energy future by no later than 2050.
Despite general contentment, some, such as India's Environment Minister have criticized the deal for setting too low a bar for success. Scientists warn that the envisaged national emissions cuts will not be enough to keep warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius.
While give and take is a normal in negotiations, we are of the opinion that the agreement could have been more ambitious. We share the concerns of several friends that agreement does not put us on the path to prevent temperature rise below 2 degrees, and that actions of developed countries are far below their historical responsibilities and fair share. We have, in the spirit of compromise, agreed on a number of phrases, and the agreement is here.
For the first time, the world has agreed on a long-term aspiration for reaching a peak in greenhouse gas emissions as soon as possible and achieving a balance between output of man-made greenhouse gases and absorption by forests or the oceans by the second half of this century.
Le 12 décembre 2015 restera une grande date pour la planète.
December 12, 2015 will remain a great date for the planet. In Paris, there have been lots of revolutions for centuries, but it's the most beautiful and the most peaceful of the revolutions which has been achieved today, the revolution for climate change.
Pour le changement climatique. Merci. Vive les Nations Unies, vive la planète et vive la France. Merci.
But Nicaraguan delegates said the agreement was not enough, adding that many of the intended nationally determined contributions are insufficient.
And what does this document propose to correct that? A stock taking at 5 years, and then in 10 years, in 2025, a new INDC exercise, even when this one didn't work. So the INDC consists of everyone doing whatever they want to. They submit it, you add it up, and that's it. Mother Earth deserves better, and humanity can do better.
From the outset, critics have said the deal had serious weaknesses, most prominently the fact that envisaged emissions cuts will not be enough to keep warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial times, the level scientists say is needed to avert the worst effect of warming, including severe droughts and rising sea levels.
Is this COP a success or a failure? I think it's a very huge success, to the extent that it's very clear that the consciousness and awareness, the commitment and the interest by nations to lower emissions is already achieved. So it's a success. There's no agreement, weak or strong. You don't get everything you expect when you go for negotiations. You get some, you lose some. That's how it's always been.
In Paris, the world decided to decarbonize and say no to dirty fossil fuel. The question is, what does the vision of a low-carbon future mean to a country like Nigeria?
What it means is we have to, first of all, get real with a plan that says we have to have a transition from fossil fuels to renewables. It doesn't mean it happens overnight, because the most important thing for us in our country are our people. We have to secure them, we have to make sure that there are institutions and governance and enabling environment to grow our economy. And then we have to know that what do we put in place to do that, whether we're industrializing or there is infrastructure, power that we need. And if countries are willing to help us in the international community, we can do more. But we've promised in the INDC to limit those emissions to 20%. And I think that that's a really good step forward. We have to work as a country. We're a federation, so we are 36 parts of one. We have to, 774 local governments, we have to pull together in the same direction. So what I would hope is that Nigeria's plan would be upgraded to a 2030 timeline. And we would see ourselves integrate the SDGs, integrate the ambitions of our INDCs, so that we have a coordinated, coherent plan for the next 15 years.
The Paris Agreement and the outcomes of the United Nations Climate Conference cover all the crucial areas identified as essential for a landmark conclusion. They are mitigation, which is reducing emissions fast enough to achieve the temperature goal, a transparent system and global stocktake accounting for climate action. And then there is adaptation, which is the strengthening ability of countries to deal with impact of climate change. There is also loss and damage, which is strengthening ability to recover from climate impact, and then support, which includes finance for nations to build clean, resilient futures. And in long-term direction, countries will peak their emissions as soon as possible and continue to submit national climate action plans that detail their future objectives to address climate change. This builds on the momentum of the unprecedented effort which has so far seen 188 countries contribute climate action plans to the new agreement, which will dramatically slow the pace of the global greenhouse gas emissions. The new agreement also establishes the principle that future national plans will be no less ambitious than existing ones, which means these 188 climate action plans provide a firm floor and foundation for higher ambition. Countries will submit updated climate plans called National Determined Contributions every 5 years, thereby steadily increasing their ambition in the long term. Climate action will also be taken forward in the period before 2020. Countries will continue to engage in a process on mitigation opportunities and will put added focus on adaptation opportunities. Additionally, they will work to define a clear roadmap on ratcheting up climate finance to $100 billion by 2020. This is further underlined by the agreement's robust transparency and accounting system, which will provide clarity on countries' implementation efforts with flexibility for countries' differing capabilities.